Guilty on all counts. After a 6-week trial with more than 70 witnesses, it took a South Carolina jury less than 3 hours of deliberations to decide that Alex Murdaugh was guilty of killing his wife and son. His sentencing is set for tomorrow. We're back with S.E. Cupp, Dave Aronberg, Patrick McEnroe joins us, and Natasha Alford as well. So, Dave, you are an attorney. What do you think sealed the deal and allowed the jury to decide this in 3 hours?
The jury saw right through this con man. He lied from day one. He lied to his family, he lied to police, and then when he got caught in the lie because of his son's video, he changed his story on the spot, and the jury didn't believe his new story. And ironically, it was his son, Paul, who solved his own murder.
Yes, we've been saying that. So Paul's cell phone captured the audio of Alex Murdaugh at the kennels that night where he said he wasn't. Didn't he know in discovery? I mean, don't they present these things in discovery where he would have been tipped off that they had this video? Like, why was he caught in that lie? Didn't he know that they had this cell phone video?
They knew later. They found it months later. But when they found it, I think he thought he could get away with it because maybe it wasn't clear that his voice was on it. But then when his own witnesses that his team called admitted, yeah, 100%, that's Alex's voice, he was in a lot of trouble. And then he had to come up with the opioid excuse. The opioids made me paranoid, which the jury didn't buy.
Just to remind everybody, let's listen to some of the lies that Alex Murdaugh had to admit to on the stand.
The second that you're confronted with facts that you can't deny, you immediately come up with a new lie. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Waters, as we've established, I have lied many times. Maggie asked me to go to the kennels with her, and I wasn't going to go. I said, I'm not going to go.
And how long after she left did you supposedly go down there?
It was very quickly.
Did you get out of the golf cart to do that?
I did.
All right, and you had to go walk to where it was?
Well, yeah, I mean, a few feet, but I did that, yes.
All right, so how long did that take? I mean,
Seconds.
we're at 8:46 now. How long did that take?
Seconds.
Just seconds? All right. And what did you do after that?
Got back on the golf cart. Did I get on the golf cart and leave that second? Probably not. But did I get on the golf cart and leave very quickly?
I don't know, Natasha. I found when he was speaking in court, him to have sort of a folksy, aw shucks demeanor that I thought that didn't scream liar to me when I was listening to him.
And maybe that was strategic, right? Mm-hmm. He was doing that because, you know, this is an experienced professional, and the entire system seemed to be working in his favor for many years. I think we got the sense from watching the prosecution at the end that they were welcomed by this community, and it seems that this is a community that felt that justice should have been delivered long ago, but Murdaugh thought he was, you know, above that. So I get the sense he was doing what he always did, and this time it just didn't work.
That's such a great point because it came out in trial that he had stolen millions from people. Yep. And there were bodies, other bodies that pop up around this family in suspicious circumstances.
Well, I mean, as Natasha just said, spot on. Because when I was here about a week ago and I was getting myself familiar with this situation, and I listened to Murdaugh on the stand, I've said to you, Allison, and to our panel at the time, this is a guy who's gotten away with everything throughout his entire life. The power, the privilege, the family, and the chickens came home to roost because, to Natasha's point, and I think the reason the verdict was delivered so quickly was because these people there knew it. They knew exactly what this guy had been doing for many years, not just murdering his wife and his kid, but swindling people and lying to people and manipulating people throughout many, many years.
Essie, we've been talking about how this is an example of how there's justice for all. They are from a wealthy, privileged family. They could afford the best attorneys. He'd been getting away with it for years, but this shows that, you know, rich people can go to prison. But haven't we seen that before? I mean, are we making too big of a deal of that? I think there's been so many high-profile cases, from Phil Spector to Robert Durst to, I mean, we've gone through the list.
Yeah.
Don't rich people go to jail a lot?
Yeah, sometimes money and fame can make you an example, right? And put a bullseye on you. Not saying that those people weren't guilty, but absolutely that can draw attention and make you an example for a judge or a prosecutor or even a jury. But I think, while I agree with everything Natasha and Patrick just said, I think we should also be careful not to intimate that this jury had some bias against the Murdaugh family because they maybe knew who they were. I think they did their job. And the prosecutor's burden is high, right? But that burden of reasonable doubt, that could have squeaked in anywhere. And it just didn't. It didn't in any of these moments of the trial. For them to come back so quickly meant no reasonable doubt. Not one juror said, well, I'm not convinced on this one thing. That's enough to hang a jury or to have an acquittal, and that didn't happen. I just think it was so damning.
What do you think was going on in there for those 3 hours? I mean, 3 hours, since you're someone who knows his way around the courtroom, does that mean they all got in there and said, like, okay, we know he's guilty, but let's give this some air of legitimacy and sit around for 3 hours? I mean, or was there one person who was on the fence? What does that mean, 3 hours?
Well, they go in there after not talking about it with each other, and they say, let's take a vote. And I think that they had 11 or 12 hands right off the bat. Then the next biggest question is, do we wait long enough to get free dinner? Because at some point, they're going to feed you. Yeah, they're going to feed you. You know, Patrick said something interesting. He said the chickens came home to roost. Think about how close this case came to unraveling if Bubba, and you know who Bubba is?
No, who's Bubba?
Bubba's a family dog. If Bubba hadn't eaten that chicken, Alec's voice wouldn't have been on the recording that Paul recorded, and I don't think Alec would have been tied to the murders.
And can I add something to this question of, you know, does this prove that we finally have justice? Only when certain victims were killed, right, did things sort of come together, right? And again, this is not to speak to whatever process it took to really, you know, build this case, but there were certain victims who were helpless. Think about all the people who he stole money from, the young man who was a quadriplegic who had his settlement money stolen from him. Those victims, you know, they didn't see justice, right? In this case,
they had to wait. Maybe
they had to wait.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, the system worked in this instance, but I think it's a moment of reflection across the board. What other ways does the system fail? Can we make sure that justice is enforced across the board for everyone?
Fair enough. I mean, I agree. There were. It took a long time for justice to catch up.
He had to kill people.
I guess so. His own family, because other people did die around them. The housekeeper died in suspicious circumstances, and then, of course, his son was going to be, I guess, on trial for the death of in the boat accident of a young woman.
Stephen Smith. Don't forget Stephen Smith, a young man who was killed, treated as roadkill, essentially. But now they're looking at the family because there may have been something nefarious going on. It was a young man who was killed in the middle of the road. And so this is just a crime family, it seems like.